Hello and welcome back, my wonderful English learners. In today's lesson, we're going to focus on something that will genuinely transform the way you sound in English, replacing overused words with richer, more sophisticated alternatives. Now, let me be clear about something first. The words we're about to discuss aren't wrong. They're not bad English. In fact, they're words you probably learned in your very first months of studying this language. There's absolutely nothing incorrect about using them, but here's the thing. If you want to move beyond beginner-level English and start sounding like a confident, fluent speaker, you need to expand your vocabulary. Relying on the same handful of basic words over and over again is one of the biggest things that keeps intermediate learners from sounding advanced. So today, we're going to fix that together, one word at a time. I'm Anna, your English teacher, and if this is your first time here, welcome. Please consider hitting like and subscribing so you don't miss lessons like this one in the future. I put a lot of thought into making these practical and easy to apply in real conversations. All right, let's dive right in. Our first overused word is nice. Think about how often you use this word. Someone asks about your weekend and you say it was nice. Someone asks about a restaurant and you say the food was nice. It's become a kind of automatic filler word for anything mildly positive. Let's replace it with something more descriptive. Instead of nice, try pleasant. For example, the atmosphere at the cafe was incredibly pleasant. This word works especially well when describing an experience, a temperature, or an ambience. Another option is enjoyable. You could say, the hiking trip we took last weekend was truly enjoyable. This word emphasizes that you had a good time, not just that something was mildly good. Then there's lovely. For instance, my grandmother has such a lovely way of telling stories. This word carries warmth and charm, making it perfect for describing people or gentle experiences. And finally, delightful. Try this. The surprise party they threw for me was absolutely delightful. This word suggests genuine happiness and pleasant surprise. It's a step up in intensity from nice. See how each of these words paints a slightly different picture. That's the beauty of expanding your vocabulary. Instead of one flat word doing all the work, you get 4 distinct shades of meaning. My suggestion: pick one of these words right now and write your own sentence with it in the comments below. Practicing this way, by actively creating your own examples, is one of the fastest ways to make new vocabulary stick in your memory. I genuinely love reading what you come up with, so don't be shy. Now let's move to our next word, important. This one shows up constantly in everyday conversation, in emails, in presentations, pretty much everywhere. And while it's a perfectly functional word, using it repeatedly makes your speech sound a little flat and predictable. Let's look at some stronger alternatives. First, crucial. You might say, getting enough sleep before the exam is crucial for your performance. This word suggests that something is absolutely necessary. Without it, things could go seriously wrong. Next is vital. For example, clear communication is vital in any successful team. This word has a similar intensity to crucial, but often gets used when talking about health, survival, or fundamental necessities. Then we have essential. Try this sentence. Having a reliable internet connection is essential for remote work. This word implies that something is a basic requirement, a non-negotiable part of the equation. And lastly, key. For instance, patience was the key factor in resolving the conflict peacefully. This word is often used when highlighting one specific element among several that made the biggest difference. Notice how these 4 words aren't perfectly interchangeable. Crucial and vital carry a sense of urgency, while key points to a specific deciding factor. Learning these small differences in meaning is what separates someone who has memorized vocabulary from someone who truly understands how to use it. Again, I'd encourage you to write a sentence with one of these words in the comments. It only takes a minute, but it makes a real difference in retention. Let's keep the momentum going and move to our next overused word, similar. This word means the same or almost the same, and it's used constantly when comparing two things. But just like the words before it, it can start to sound repetitive if it's the only comparison word in your vocabulary. In the next part, we'll explore some excellent alternatives to similar, along with fresh replacements for words like boring and fast. Stay with me, because these next few words are going to add even more color and precision to your everyday English. All right, let's pick up right where we left off with the word similar. As I mentioned, this word gets used whenever we want to point out that two things share common features. It's useful, but it's also a bit generic. Let's look at some more precise and elegant alternatives. First up is alike. For example, my sister and I think so much alike that we often finish each other's sentences. This word works particularly well when describing people or things that share behavioral or physical similarities. Next, we have resembling. Try this. The old photograph showed a young man closely resembling my father. This word is a bit more formal and is often used when comparing appearances or visual characteristics. Then there's homogeneous. For instance, the committee members had a fairly homogeneous set of opinions on the matter. This word is more academic and technical, often used to describe groups that share the same qualities or characteristics throughout. And finally, comparable. You might say, the prices of the two laptops were comparable, so I chose based on design instead. This word is especially useful in situations involving measurement, evaluation, or ranking, like comparing prices, sizes, or performance. With these four alternatives in your pocket, you can now describe similarities with much more nuance depending on the context, whether you're talking about people, objects, prices, or opinions. As always, try crafting a sentence of your own with one of these words and share it in the comments. Now let's tackle a word that describes exactly how a lot of us feel about certain meetings, lectures, or Monday mornings. Boring. This word is fine, but it's also a little lazy when it comes to expressing exactly why something failed to hold our attention. Let's fix that. First, dull. For example, the documentary started off dull, but it picked up pace in the second half. This word suggests a lack of excitement or sharpness, almost like the experience had no edge to it. Next is tedious. Try this. Filling out those tax forms every year is such a tedious process. This word specifically emphasizes something that takes a long time and feels repetitive or tiring, not just uninteresting. Then we have monotonous. For instance, his voice was so monotonous during the presentation that half the audience started checking their phones. This word is perfect for describing something that lacks variation, particularly tone of voice, rhythm, or routine. And lastly, wearisome. You could say, the endless paperwork at the new job turned out to be quite wearisome. This word combines boredom with a sense of exhaustion, as if the tedium is physically or mentally draining you. Each of these four words captures a slightly different flavor of boring. Dull is flat and uninspiring. Tedious is repetitive and slow. Monotonous lacks variation, and wearisome leaves you feeling drained. Try using one in a sentence in the comments below, and let's see how creative you can get. Moving on, let's talk about the word fast. This is one of those words we use constantly, whether we're talking about internet speed, a person's reaction time, or how quickly a situation changed. But just like our other examples, there are richer alternatives worth learning. First, speedy. For example, the company is known for its speedy customer service responses. This word works well in casual and semi-formal contexts, often related to efficiency. Next, rapid. Try this. The city has experienced rapid development over the past decade. This word is often used to describe growth, change, or movement that happens quickly and often on a large scale. Then there's hasty. For instance, he made a hasty decision to quit his job without thinking it through. Notice that this word often carries a slightly negative connotation, suggesting that something was done too quickly, perhaps without enough thought or care. And finally, nimble. You might say, the dancer was so nimble that she seemed to glide across the stage effortlessly. This word specifically refers to quick, skillful, and graceful movement, often used for physical agility or mental sharpness. So there you have it, 4 fresh ways to talk about speed. each with its own subtle shade of meaning. Speedy and rapid are fairly neutral. Hasty often implies recklessness, and nimble suggests grace and skill. Coming up next, we're going to look at alternatives for interesting and easy, two more words that show up constantly in daily conversation. These next examples will give you even more tools to make your English sound polished and natural, so let's keep going. Let's continue building your vocabulary with the word interesting. This is one of the most commonly used words in the English language, and honestly, it's used so often that it barely communicates anything specific anymore. When you say something is interesting, your listener doesn't really know if you mean it's exciting, mysterious, thought-provoking, or just mildly noteworthy. Let's fix that with some more descriptive alternatives. First, fascinating. For example, the museum exhibit on ancient civilizations was absolutely fascinating. This word suggests deep curiosity and a strong pull toward learning more. It's a step above simply interesting. Next is engaging. Try this. The podcast host has such an engaging way of telling stories that I never want the episode to end. This word is perfect for describing something that holds your attention actively, rather than something you're just passively aware of. Then we have intriguing. For instance, the plot twist in the novel was so intriguing that I couldn't put the book down. This word carries a sense of mystery or curiosity. It's often used when something makes you want to know more or figure something out. And finally, captivating. You could say, her presentation was so captivating that nobody in the room touched their phones. This word suggests that something completely holds someone's attention, almost like it has a magnetic pull. Notice the subtle differences here. Fascinating suggests deep curiosity, engaging suggests active attention, intriguing suggests mystery, and captivating suggests being completely absorbed. Try picking one of these and writing your own sentence in the comments. This kind of active practice really is the secret to remembering vocabulary long-term, so don't skip it. Now let's talk about the word easy. We use this constantly to describe tasks, instructions, recipes, and processes that don't require much effort. But once again, there are more specific and elegant ways to express this idea. First, effortless. For example, she made public speaking look effortless even though she was terrified backstage. This word is great for describing something that appears simple, even if it actually required skill or practice to achieve. Next, straightforward. Try this. The instructions for assembling the furniture were refreshingly straightforward. This word is ideal for describing processes, instructions, or explanations that are clear and free of confusion. Then there's uncomplicated. For instance, their relationship was refreshingly uncomplicated, no drama, no games, just honesty. This word works well beyond just tasks. It can describe relationships, situations, or even personalities that are simple and easy to understand. And finally, manageable. You might say, the project felt overwhelming at first, but once we broke it into smaller steps, it became manageable. This word is particularly useful when something isn't necessarily easy, but it's within your capability to handle. I hope you're noticing a pattern here. Learning English this way, through clear examples and gradual replacement of basic words, should feel fairly straightforward and even a little effortless once you get the hang of it. Let me know in the comments if you agree. Let's move forward to another word that comes up constantly, especially in professional and academic contexts: serious. Whether we're talking about a serious problem, a serious conversation, or a serious person, this word gets used in a huge range of situations, which actually makes it a bit vague. Let's sharpen it up. First, severe. For example, the company faced severe consequences after the data breach became public. This word is often used to describe negative outcomes, punishments, or conditions that are extreme in intensity. Next, earnest. Try this. He made an earnest attempt to repair the friendship after months of silence. This word suggests sincerity and genuine effort. It's less about intensity and more about honest, heartfelt intention. Then we have stern. For instance, the teacher gave the students a stern warning about turning in late assignments. This word is perfect for describing someone's tone, expression, or manner when they're being strict or authoritative. And finally, solemn. You could say, there was a solemn atmosphere in the room as the news was announced. This word captures a sense of gravity, formality, and quiet seriousness, often used in emotional or ceremonial contexts. So now you have 4 excellent alternatives to serious, each suited to a different situation, whether it's consequences, sincerity, tone, or atmosphere. As always, I encourage you to write your own sentence using one of these words in the comments below. This kind of repetition and active use is exactly how new vocabulary becomes permanent in your memory. Coming up next, we'll tackle 2 more incredibly common words, funny and hard, and by the end, you'll have a whole new toolkit for sounding more fluent and precise in everyday English. Let's keep the momentum going with our next overused word, funny. This word gets used for everything from a clever joke to a slightly odd situation, which means it doesn't always communicate exactly what kind of humor or amusement you're describing. Let's add some precision here. First, witty. For example, his witty comebacks during the debate had the whole audience laughing. This word specifically describes humor that's clever, quick, and intelligent. It's not just funny. It shows sharpness of mind. Next, amusing. Try this. The children found the puppet show incredibly amusing. This word is a bit softer and more general, often used for lighthearted entertainment rather than laugh-out-loud comedy. Then we have comical. For instance, the way the cat kept chasing its own tail was genuinely comical. This word works well for situations that are silly or absurd in a lighthearted way, often involving physical or visual humor. And finally, hilarious. You might say, the comedian's new special was absolutely hilarious from start to finish. This word represents the highest intensity on this list, reserved for something that makes you laugh uncontrollably. So to summarize, witty is about clever humor, amusing is gentle entertainment, comical is silly or absurd, and hilarious is intensely funny. Try using one of these in your own sentence in the comments section. I always enjoy seeing how you apply these words in your own context. Now let's move to our final word for today's lesson, hard. This word describes anything difficult, whether it's a task, a decision, a workout, or a life situation. But because it covers so much ground, it often fails to communicate the specific type of difficulty involved. Let's fix that with 4 strong alternatives. First, challenging. For example, the new job came with a challenging set of responsibilities, but I was excited to grow. This word carries a slightly positive connotation, suggesting that the difficulty is also an opportunity for growth or achievement. Next, arduous. Go ahead and say it with me, arduous. Try this sentence. The climb to the summit was arduous, taking nearly 12 hours of continuous effort. This word specifically emphasizes physical or mental exhaustion resulting from prolonged difficulty. Then we have tough. For instance, she had to make some tough choices when restructuring her small business. This word is commonly used for decisions or situations that require strength, resilience, or emotional fortitude. And finally, strenuous. You could say, the training program included strenuous exercises designed to build endurance. This word is often used specifically in the context of physical effort, workouts, labor, or anything that demands significant exertion. I really hope you're not finding the process of learning English arduous or strenuous. My goal with these lessons is to make your learning journey as effortless and uncomplicated as possible. Notice how I just used 2 of the words we covered earlier in this very sentence. That's the kind of natural, integrated vocabulary use I want you to aim for in your own speaking and writing. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered today. We started with nice and learned that pleasant, enjoyable, lovely, and delightful can each paint a more vivid picture depending on the situation. We moved through important, discovering that crucial, vital, essential, and key each carry their own particular weight and context. We explored similar, learning that alike, resembling, homogeneous, and comparable each apply best in slightly different scenarios, whether you're discussing people, appearances, groups, or measurements. From there, we tackled boring, uncovering dull, tedious, monotonous, and wearisome as vivid alternatives that each highlight a different aspect of tedium. We also covered fast, replacing it with speedy, rapid, hasty, and nimble, each word carrying its own connotation about the nature and quality of that speed. Then came interesting, where fascinating, engaging, intriguing, and captivating each offer a distinct flavor of attention and curiosity. We looked at easy next, learning that effortless, straightforward, uncomplicated, and manageable each apply to slightly different kinds of simplicity. And finally, we finished with serious, funny, and hard, each paired with 4 rich, descriptive alternatives that will make your speech and writing sound noticeably more advanced. That's a tremendous amount of new vocabulary to absorb in one sitting, so don't worry if it takes some time to feel natural. In the next part, we'll talk about the best way to actually integrate these words into your daily speech so they stick permanently, rather than just becoming words you recognize but never actually use yourself. Now that we've covered all 10 of today's overused words and their replacements, let's talk about something equally important. How do you actually make these new words stick? Because here's the truth that a lot of English learners don't want to hear. Simply watching a vocabulary lesson once is not enough. Passive learning, where you just listen and nod along, creates only a shallow, temporary memory of these words. If you want them to become a natural part of your active vocabulary, the words you reach for automatically in conversation, you need to engage with them actively. This is exactly why I've been asking you throughout this lesson to write your own sentences in the comments. It's not just a way to interact with the channel, it's genuinely one of the most effective learning strategies available to you. When you create your own sentence using a new word, your brain has to process that word on a much deeper level than when you're just listening to someone else's example. You have to think about the meaning, consider the context, and construct something original. That process of active retrieval and creation is what transforms a word from something you recognize into something you truly own. So here's a practical suggestion. Instead of trying to memorize all 10 words and their replacements in one sitting, pick just 2 or 3 that stood out to you the most. Maybe captivating really resonated with you, or perhaps arduous felt like a word you could genuinely use in your daily life. Write those words down somewhere, in a notebook, in a notes app, wherever works for you. Then, for the next few days, make a conscious effort to use those specific words in your conversations, your writing, or even your internal thoughts. Another technique that works incredibly well is what's sometimes called spaced repetition. Rather than reviewing a word once and moving on, come back to it after a day, then after 3 days. Then after a week. Each time you revisit the word, your memory of it strengthens. You might rewatch this video after a few days specifically to refresh your memory on words you've started to forget. This kind of spaced review dramatically increases long-term retention compared to just watching something once and never returning to it. I'd also encourage you to start noticing these words when you encounter them elsewhere, in books, in movies, in podcasts, in conversations with native speakers. Once you've learned a word like nimble or wearisome, you'll start to notice it appearing in places you never paid attention to before. This is sometimes called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, where a newly learned concept suddenly seems to appear everywhere. It's not that these words weren't there before, it's that your brain wasn't tuned to recognize them. Once you actively learn a word, your brain becomes primed to notice it in the wild, and every time you notice it, that connection gets a little bit stronger. Something else worth mentioning is the importance of context over memorization. Rather than just memorizing that vital means the same as important, try to understand the subtle differences in when each word is most naturally used. For instance, you probably wouldn't say the meeting is vital in the same way you'd say the meeting is important, even though the core meaning is similar. Vital tends to carry a slightly stronger sense of necessity, almost like something essential to survival or success, while important is more neutral and general. Paying attention to these nuances, rather than treating words as perfect one-to-one substitutes, is what will eventually allow you to sound truly fluent rather than just technically correct. I also want to address something that a lot of learners worry about: the fear of using a new word incorrectly. It's completely natural to feel hesitant about using a word like solemn or homogeneous for the first time, worrying that you might use it in the wrong context or that it might sound unnatural. But here's the thing: making mistakes is an unavoidable and necessary part of the learning process. Native speakers themselves sometimes use words slightly incorrectly or in ways that don't perfectly match the dictionary definition. The goal isn't perfection, it's communication and gradual improvement. So my advice is simple: don't wait until you feel completely confident to start using these new words. Use them now, even if you're not entirely sure you're using them perfectly. Write them in your comments, use them in a conversation with a friend, incorporate them into a journal entry. The more you use a word, even imperfectly, the faster you'll develop an intuitive sense of how and when it should be used. Fluency isn't built through cautious perfectionism, it's built through consistent, active practice, even when that practice includes occasional mistakes. As we bring today's lesson to a close, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts on how to continue building your vocabulary beyond just this single lesson. The 10 words we replaced today: nice, important, similar, boring, fast, interesting, easy, serious, funny, and hard, are just the beginning. English is an incredibly rich language with countless overused words that could benefit from more precise, descriptive alternatives. Words like good, bad, big, small, and happy are all excellent candidates for a similar treatment, and if this lesson was helpful for you, that might be exactly what we cover in an upcoming video. In the meantime, here's a simple challenge for you. Over the next week, try to identify moments in your own speech or writing where you default to one of these 10 overused words. Maybe you're texting a friend and you're about to type "that's so nice," or you're writing an email and you're about to describe a project as important. In that exact moment, pause for just a second and ask yourself, is there a more precise word I could use here? Could I say delightful instead of nice? Could I say crucial instead of important? This small habit of pausing and reconsidering your word choice, even just occasionally, will train your brain to reach for richer vocabulary more naturally over time. I also want to remind you that becoming fluent in a language isn't about using the most complicated words possible in every single sentence. That would actually sound unnatural and forced. The goal is variety and precision, using the right word for the right context, rather than repeating the same basic word regardless of the situation. A native speaker doesn't use fascinating in every sentence where something is mildly interesting, but they also don't rely exclusively on interesting for absolutely everything either. The key is having a diverse vocabulary that allows you to choose the most fitting word for each specific moment, and that's exactly what we've worked on together today. I want to genuinely thank you for sticking with me through this entire lesson. Learning vocabulary this way, through detailed examples, context, and encouragement to actively participate, takes more effort than passively watching a video. But I truly believe it's one of the most effective ways to make real, lasting progress in your English fluency. If you made it this far, that already shows a level of dedication that will absolutely pay off over time. Before you go, I have a few final requests. First, if you haven't already, please make sure to write at least one sentence in the comments using a word from today's lesson. It genuinely doesn't matter which word you choose. What matters is that you take that small step of active practice right now, while the lesson is still fresh in your mind. Second, if you found this lesson valuable, please consider hitting like and subscribing to the channel. It helps me know that this style of teaching is working for you, and it ensures you won't miss future lessons covering key vocabulary topics just like this one. And finally, I'd love to hear from you about which of today's words felt the most useful or interesting to you personally. Was it captivating? Was it arduous? Was it nimble? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to ask questions if any of the words or examples weren't entirely clear. I read through the comments regularly, and I genuinely enjoy seeing how you're applying what you've learned. Thank you again for spending this time learning with me today. I hope this lesson has given you practical, usable tools to make your English sound more polished, more precise, and more naturally fluent in your everyday conversations. Remember, the words we covered today, whether it's replacing nice with delightful or hard with arduous, aren't meant to make you sound overly formal or unnatural. They're meant to give you options so that you can express exactly what you mean with exactly the right shade of meaning in any given moment. Until next time, stay witty, keep smiling, and most importantly, keep practicing your English every single day. I'll see you very soon with another engaging and useful lesson. Take care and happy learning. Want to be notified when Claude responds.